There are moments in life when everything could change with a simple decision, a single choice. A choice that may seem insignificant in the moment, but in hindsight, we see it for what it truly was, the turning point. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the subscribe button. This story begins with a mother, a woman whose love for her son was undeniable, so deep, so fierce, that it clouded her judgment, made her blind to the realities around her. And though she thought she was doing what was best for him, she unknowingly sowed the seeds of his downfall. Her name was Grace. Grace had always been the kind of mother who could never say no. It wasn't that she didn't have rules, or boundaries, no, it wasn't that. She simply couldn't bear to see her son, Lucas, upset. She couldn't handle the thought of his disappointment. It broke her heart. So, when he asked for something, she gave it. When he wanted more, she gave more. She wasn't blind to the fact that Lucas was a bit different from other children. He was, shall we say, spoiled. The other parents might talk behind her back, whispering that Lucas was indulged too much, that Grace was giving him everything he wanted, without teaching him the value of hard work or respect. But Grace never listened. To her, it was simple: if Lucas wanted something, he should have it. She wanted him to feel loved, wanted him to be happy. She wanted to give him everything she never had. But the thing about giving too much, without limits, is that it creates an imbalance. It nurtures entitlement, and when you nurture entitlement, you forget the most important thing: gratitude. Lucas grew up with a sense of superiority, a belief that the world existed to serve him. At first, Grace thought it was just a phase, the behavior of a child who had not yet learned what it meant to respect others. She was patient. She was hopeful. He'll grow out of it, she told herself. Over and over again. But he didn't. As Lucas grew older, his demands grew bigger. He wanted a new phone. He wanted the latest gaming console. He wanted designer clothes, and Grace gave them to him. He wanted to stay out late, long past the hours that made sense for a teenager. He wanted to skip school, and, without hesitation, Grace gave in. After all, if he was unhappy, surely she should do something to fix it, right? But as time went on, Lucas's behavior grew more troubling. His grades began to slip, and he became more aggressive, more difficult to control. Grace tried to intervene, but it seemed like every time she spoke, every time she asked him to behave, to respect the boundaries that every parent should set, Lucas would push back even harder. But Grace, oh Grace, she just couldn't stand to see him upset. She couldn't stand the thought that her son might be angry with her. And so, she continued to give in, continued to soften her words, continued to make excuses for him. She told herself she was doing the best she could, that she was just being a mother, after all. She never imagined that her kindness could be the very thing that was hurting him. But sometimes love isn't about giving someone what they want. Sometimes love is about giving them what they need. And what Lucas needed was direction, discipline, guidance. He needed boundaries. But Grace never learned that lesson, not until it was too late. You see, it was the smallest of choices that led them to where they were, the choice to let him stay out later than he should have, the choice to not discipline him when he was rude to his teachers, the choice to let him get away with things other children would have been punished for. And one day, the consequences of those choices came crashing down. But how could Grace have known? How could anyone have predicted that the path she was on with Lucas would lead them here? That's the problem, isn't it? You think you're doing the right thing. Until you realize, far too late, that you weren't. Lucas didn't just wake up one day and become a troublemaker. It was a slow progression, a slow build of bad decisions, until one final choice, one final moment, shattered everything. And that moment came when Grace's worst fear became her reality. But what was that moment? How did things spiral so far out of control? Hold on, we'll get there. But before we do, let me ask you this. Have you ever given someone everything they wanted? Have you ever done something out of love, only to find out it wasn't the right thing for them? Sometimes the most difficult thing is realizing that the love we think is helping, is actually holding them back. Because in this story, Grace would soon realize, too late, that if only she had listened, if only she had seen things from a different perspective, this wouldn't have happened. It all started with that phone call. Grace was sitting in her kitchen, sipping on a warm cup of coffee, the steam rising in the quiet morning air. The house was still, peaceful, as it usually was before the storm of the day began. She was alone, savoring the calm before Lucas came in, demanding his breakfast, asking for the next thing he wanted. But today was different. The phone rang, cutting through the stillness like a sharp edge. Grace didn't recognize the number, but something about it unsettled her. A flicker of unease stirred in her chest, though she brushed it aside. It was probably just another telemarketer. She almost let it go to voicemail, but some inner voice, urged her to answer. And when she did, her world began to change. The voice on the other end of the line was official, calm, and professional. "Is this Mrs. Grace Walker?" The voice asked, and there was something in the tone that immediately made Grace feel like she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't see. "Yes, it is," she responded, trying to steady her breath. "I'm calling from the school, Lucas Walker's school. I'm afraid we have some concerning news regarding his behavior." Her stomach sank. Her mind raced. She tried to steady herself, tried to imagine what might be coming. Lucas was in trouble. No. It couldn't be. Not her son. Lucas was caught breaking into a teacher's office, the voice continued, and we have reports that he has been caught skipping class multiple times this semester. He's also been disruptive in other students' classes. Her grip tightened on the phone as a cold chill ran down her spine. This wasn't the Lucas she knew. This couldn't be the Lucas she raised. She stayed silent for a moment, struggling to process the words. She didn't know what to say, or if she even wanted to hear more. But the voice on the other end wasn't done. "We've spoken with him about the issue, but frankly, we're at a loss. His behavior is becoming a serious concern. We're going to need you to come in and discuss what steps we can take moving forward." The words stung like a slap to the face. Grace's mind was spinning. How did this happen? Where had she gone wrong? She always thought she was doing her best. Why didn't she see this coming? She hung up the phone, the silence of the house suddenly feeling suffocating. Her heart pounded, and for a moment, all she could do was sit there, staring at nothing, thinking, reflecting. How had it come to this? She remembered the first time she had spoiled him, really spoiled him. Lucas had been just a little boy then, maybe 5 or 6, his eyes wide with wonder as he looked up at her. He had asked for a toy, one that was far more expensive than she could afford at the time. But Grace had loved him so much, she couldn't stand to see the disappointment on his face. So, she went ahead and bought it for him. And from that moment on, she kept giving him more, and more. She would make excuses for him when he misbehaved, telling herself, "He's just a child." She told herself that he would understand one day, that the world would teach him what she couldn't. But, the world wasn't teaching him. She wasn't teaching him. And now, here they were. The consequences were staring her right in the face. She stood up, feeling like the walls were closing in around her. She needed to do something. She had to make it right. But what could she do? Later that day, Grace went to the school, her mind heavy with guilt. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as she made her way to the principal's office. The air felt thick, tense, as if everyone in the school knew what was coming, even though they didn't. When she walked into the office, Lucas was sitting there, slumped in a chair. His eyes avoided hers, his face flushed with embarrassment and something else, maybe anger. Maybe regret. But Grace couldn't tell. She only saw the boy she had raised, the boy she loved so fiercely, but who seemed like a stranger to her now. The principal was sitting behind a desk, his expression stern but kind. He greeted her with a nod, and they sat down across from one another. The room felt cold, distant. "Mrs. Walker," the principal began, "I'm afraid we've reached a point where we can't ignore Lucas's behavior any longer. We've tried to intervene, but this behavior has been escalating for months. We need a plan to get him back on track." Grace's heart sank. How did it get so bad? The words hit her like a wave, and she realized, in that moment, how much she had failed her son. She looked at Lucas, searching his face for the boy she once knew, the one who would smile at her with that innocent look, the one who would hold her hand as they walked through the park. But now he seemed lost. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I didn't know. I didn't know it had gotten this bad." The principal nodded slowly. It's not uncommon for parents to be in the dark about certain behaviors, especially when a child is very good at hiding them. But this is the result of not being held accountable for actions, of not learning the consequences of their choices. Grace's hands trembled. She wanted to scream, to apologize, to make things right, but all she could do was sit there, feeling the weight of every wrong turn she had taken with Lucas. And in that moment, she realized. If only she had listened. If only she had listened when the whispers started, when the teachers and other parents raised concerns. If only she had been firm with him, if only she had said no when it would have mattered. But it was too late. It was too late. Lucas's future was now uncertain, his life hanging in the balance. And all Grace could do was wonder where things had gone wrong. The days that followed were a blur. Grace couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lucas's face, angry, lost, and hurt. The boy she once knew, the boy who had looked up to her, was slipping further away, and all she could do was watch helplessly. She spent hours reflecting on everything. How had she missed the signs? How had she allowed things to escalate to this point? She felt like she had failed him, failed herself, and above all, failed as a mother. She thought back to the times when she would rush to his aid at the smallest sign of trouble. When he struggled with a school project, she'd take over, do it for him. When he got into a small argument with a friend, she'd step in, smooth things over, and ensure that Lucas never had to face the consequences of his actions. At the time, it felt like love. It felt like being the protective mother, the one who always had his back. But now, in the cold light of reality, it was clear that all she had been doing was enabling him. She hadn't been protecting him, she had been sheltering him from the lessons he desperately needed to learn. The following week, Grace took Lucas to see a counselor. She was desperate, clinging to the hope that someone, anyone, could fix the damage that had been done. She was holding on to the thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back. The counselor, a calm woman with gentle eyes, listened patiently as Grace explained everything. She described Lucas's behavior, his refusal to listen, his increasing aggression, and how, despite her best efforts, she couldn't seem to get through to him. When she was done, the counselor nodded thoughtfully. She didn't offer quick fixes or empty promises. Instead, she asked Grace a question that seemed to hit her like a lightning bolt. "Mrs. Walker, what do you think Lucas really needs from you right now?" Grace blinked, caught off guard by the question. She thought she had been doing what was best for him, giving him everything he wanted, protecting him from pain and disappointment. But now, she wasn't so sure. After a long pause, Grace answered quietly, "I don't know. I guess I thought I was just trying to make him happy. I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he'd be okay. But I see now that I've failed him. I've failed us both." The counselor nodded, her gaze softening. "Love is a powerful thing, Mrs. Walker. But love doesn't always mean giving someone everything they ask for. Sometimes, love means being the voice of reason, the one who teaches, the one who guides. Sometimes, love means making tough choices for the future, even if they aren't easy in the moment. Grace felt a lump form in her throat. The realization was harsh, but it was true. She hadn't been doing what was best for Lucas. She had been doing what was easiest. She had been trying to avoid conflict, trying to avoid the heartache of seeing him upset, but in doing so, she had created a boy who was unprepared for the realities of life. A boy who was so used to getting what he wanted that he couldn't handle it when things didn't go his way. The counselor continued. You've been protecting him from consequences, and in doing so, you've made him believe that the world revolves around him. But life isn't like that. He needs to learn accountability. He needs to learn that actions have consequences. For the first time, Grace saw the truth in the counselor's words. She had created a cycle. A cycle where Lucas didn't have to face the consequences of his actions, and in doing so, he had become reckless, entitled, and disconnected from reality. But it wasn't too late. It wasn't too late to change. She left the session with a heavy heart, but with a new sense of purpose. She had to fix this. She had to fix Lucas. But more importantly, she had to fix herself. She had to become the mother he needed, not the one he wanted. That night, as they sat down for dinner, Grace felt the weight of the conversation hanging between them. Lucas was quiet, his eyes downcast as he picked at his food. He hadn't spoken much since the school, and Grace wasn't sure if he even cared. She took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy. But it was time. It was time to change. Lucas, she said softly, we need to talk. He looked up at her, his expression guarded. About what? She took another breath, steadying herself. About you, about us. About how things have been going. Lucas frowned, clearly not thrilled by the conversation. I don't want to talk about this right now. Grace's heart ached, but she pressed on. I know you don't want to hear this, but I need you to understand something, Lucas. I love you. And I've always tried to give you everything you wanted, but I realize now that I've been doing it all wrong. I've been protecting you from the consequences of your actions, and that's not helping you. It's hurting you. Lucas looked away, clearly uncomfortable. He didn't want to hear this, didn't want to face the truth. But Grace was determined. You need to learn that actions have consequences, she continued. You need to learn that life won't always give you what you want when you want it. And I need to help you understand that. He didn't respond at first. There was silence, and Grace wasn't sure what to say next. But then, something shifted. I'm sorry, Mom, Lucas said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Grace's heart broke, but at the same time, she felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't too late. It wasn't too late to teach him, to help him grow, to make things right. It was going to be hard, yes. There would be resistance, there would be setbacks. But she could see now that the only way forward was through love, tough, uncomfortable, but necessary love. And as she looked at her son, she realized that, no matter how far he had strayed, no matter how difficult the road ahead would be, she was ready. She was ready to help him find his way. It wasn't easy, that much was clear. The road ahead was long, filled with moments of doubt, resistance, and pain. But Grace knew now, more than ever, that she had to stay strong. She had to be the mother Lucas needed, even if it meant breaking the patterns of a lifetime. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new rules, new boundaries, and new expectations. For Grace, it was like stepping into unfamiliar territory, and for Lucas, it was like being thrown into a storm he wasn't prepared for. At first, there was anger. There were tears. There were moments when Lucas refused to listen, when he lashed out because he didn't understand. He'd never been held accountable like this before. One evening, after dinner, Lucas stormed up to his room, slamming the door behind him. Grace stood in the hallway, unsure whether to follow, unsure of what to do. The old Grace, the one who would have let him get away with it, who would have apologized and caved in to his demands, would have backed down. But not this time. this time, she was determined to stand her ground. She knocked softly on his door. "Lucas," she called gently, "can we talk?" For a moment, there was only silence. And then, his voice, muffled but clearly upset. "I don't want to talk, Mom. You don't get it." Grace's heart tightened. She did get it. She had been there once, too. She knew what it felt like to fight against something you didn't understand. She knew the anger, the confusion, the sense of betrayal. But this time, she had to stay firm. "I know this is hard," she said softly, "but I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it because I love you. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You can't keep going down this path, Lucas. It's not healthy for you. And it's not healthy for us." For a moment, there was only silence again. Grace held her breath, unsure of what would come next. Finally, the door creaked open just a crack. Lucas's face appeared in the gap, his eyes red from the tears he had tried to hide. His voice was small, almost lost. "But I don't want to change. I don't want things to be different." Grace stepped forward, kneeling down to his level. She could feel her heart breaking for him, but she also knew this was the moment. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "I know, sweetheart. I know," she said softly, reaching out to place a hand on his shoulder. "But sometimes, change is necessary. Sometimes, we have to go through difficult things in order to become who we're meant to be. You're a good person, Lucas. You've just lost your way a little. But I believe in you." There was a pause, and for a moment, Grace wondered if she had made a mistake. But then, Lucas's hand slowly opened the door wider, and he stepped out, sitting beside her on the floor. "I don't know if I can do it," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know if I can change." Grace wrapped her arm around him, pulling him close. "You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to be perfect. But you do have to try. And I'll be right here with you, every step of the way. You're not alone in this." In that moment, it felt like something had shifted. It wasn't a dramatic change, no grand gestures. But it was a beginning. It was the first step toward healing, toward rebuilding the trust and understanding that had been lost. Lucas wasn't suddenly the perfect son, and Grace wasn't suddenly the perfect mother. But they were starting to rebuild. One step at a time. The following weeks were a mix of difficult conversations and small victories. There were still moments when Lucas would push back, when he would try to test the limits. But Grace stood firm, and little by little, Lucas began to understand. He started to take responsibility for his actions, even if it was hard for him. He began to see the value in hard work, in making the right choices, and in facing the consequences of his decisions. He didn't always get it right, but that was okay. Grace didn't expect perfection, she just wanted him to learn, to grow. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Lucas turned to Grace, his face softer than it had been in a long time. "Mom," he said quietly, I'm sorry. For everything. I know I've messed up, and I know I haven't been the best son. But I'll try. I promise I'll try to be better." Grace's heart swelled with emotion. She hadn't expected this moment to come so soon. She hadn't expected him to admit it, to acknowledge the changes he needed to make. But there it was. The beginning of redemption, the start of a new chapter. "I know you will, Lucas," Grace said, her voice thick with tears. "And I'm proud of you. So proud of you." There were no more grand speeches, no more dramatic revelations. It was a quiet moment, but one that held more meaning than any words could express. It was a moment of understanding, of acceptance, and of love. Real love. The kind of love that isn't afraid to challenge, to push, to make tough decisions, even when it hurts. And that, Grace realized, was the real lesson. Love isn't about giving someone everything they want. It's about helping them become the best version of themselves. It's about showing them that they are capable of more than they think, that they are worthy of the effort it takes to help them grow. Lucas wasn't perfect. Grace wasn't perfect. But they were on the right path, together. It wasn't too late. And, most importantly, it never would be. As they sat there, side by side, the evening sun casting a warm glow over the yard, Grace realized that even though the road ahead would still be difficult, they had something they hadn't had in a long time: hope. And that, more than anything, was the greatest gift she could give her son. The months that followed weren't easy, but they were filled with progress. With each passing day, Lucas took one more step toward understanding, toward maturity, toward responsibility. And with every step he took, Grace's heart grew fuller, as she saw glimpses of the boy she once knew, the boy she still loved deeply, emerging from the shadows. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is. But it was real. They were both learning, growing, together. And for the first time in a long while, Grace felt a sense of peace, a sense of hope, as she watched Lucas begin to reshape his life. One afternoon, Grace picked up Lucas from school, something she hadn't done in ages. The car ride was quiet at first, just the hum of the engine and the distant sounds of the city around them. But Lucas, who had always been the one to stay silent, spoke up first. "Mom," he said, his voice tentative but thoughtful, "I wanted to thank you. For not giving up on me. For sticking with me, even when I made everything harder." Grace's heart melted. She had waited for this moment, but she hadn't known how it would feel when it came. It felt like a weight lifting, a burden she hadn't even realized she had been carrying, easing off her shoulders. "I never gave up on you, Lucas," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I was just waiting for you to see the value in yourself. You have so much to offer, so much potential. I believe in you. I always have." Lucas glanced out the window, his eyes distant for a moment before he spoke again. "I didn't get it before, but I get it now. It was hard, but I needed that push. I needed to stop running away from what was right, from what was real. I think I'm finally ready to face the world, not as the kid who gets everything he wants, but as someone who works for it." Grace's eyes welled up, but she quickly blinked the tears away. This was it. This was the moment she had worked so hard for. "You already are, Lucas," she whispered. "You're ready." That evening, Lucas sat down with his homework, the first time in months that he didn't need Grace's prompting to start it. She noticed the change in him, the quiet determination in the way he approached each problem, the focus in his eyes. He wasn't perfect, and there were still times when the temptation to slip back into old habits crept in. But each time he did, he caught himself and remembered what they had learned together. That mistakes were part of life, but they didn't define him. It was a slow process, a process full of small victories and setbacks, but it was working. They were building something new. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, they were stronger now, both of them. As the year drew to a close, Lucas's grades had improved. He had even joined a sports team, something Grace had never thought he'd be interested in. He'd made new friends, friends who respected him, friends who encouraged him to do better. It was like watching a flower bloom slowly, day by day, as Lucas began to understand the importance of earning respect, of earning his place in the world. One night, after dinner, Lucas sat across from Grace, his hands clasped together. There was something different about him, something more mature. He looked her in the eyes, a soft, almost shy smile on his lips. "I know I've let you down before, Mom," he began, his voice sincere, "but I promise, I'm trying. I'm really trying to be better. I'm not perfect, but I want to be someone you can be proud of." Grace's heart swelled with pride. She couldn't stop the tears this time. He had done it. He had come so far. "You already are someone I'm proud of, Lucas," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've always been proud of you. And I always will be." They sat there for a long time, in comfortable silence, just enjoying each other's company. There was no more tension between them, no more anger or frustration. It wasn't always easy, and they both knew there would still be challenges ahead, but Grace finally felt that they had found their way back to each other. They had found their footing. The next day, Grace received a call from the principal at Lucas's school. For a moment, she felt her heart skip a beat, nervous that something had gone wrong again. But the principal's tone was warm, even proud. "Mrs. Walker," the principal said, "I just wanted to let you know that Lucas has been showing tremendous improvement. He's been working hard, participating in class, and even helping others. I just thought you should know how far he's come. We're really proud of him." Grace smiled through her tears. This was the moment she had always hoped for, the moment she could finally see the fruits of their hard work. Lucas had turned a corner. The old Grace, the one who thought she could shield her son from the world, had learned a valuable lesson. And Lucas, the boy who had once felt entitled to everything, had learned the hard truth that the world doesn't revolve around him. He had learned to be accountable, to understand the importance of hard work, and to accept responsibility for his actions. And Grace, well, Grace had learned that love isn't about always protecting someone from pain, but about guiding them through it, helping them face the consequences, and showing them that they're capable of far more than they ever thought. Lucas wasn't perfect. He would stumble again, like all of us do. But he had learned to stand back up, to keep moving forward. And that, Grace knew, was all that mattered. As they sat together, watching the sunset one evening, Grace realized that sometimes, the hardest moments in life lead us to the most beautiful transformations. And as she looked at Lucas, she knew that they were just getting started. This was only the beginning. Months passed, and as time unfolded, Grace began to witness something she hadn't dared to dream of during the darkest moments: real, lasting change in her son. She knew that he was not the same boy he had been before, but it wasn't just the grades or the improved behavior at school that made her proud. It was the quiet shifts, the subtle changes in his attitude, his demeanor, the way he carried himself now. Lucas had begun to understand the value of hard work, the need for respect, and the importance of responsibility. He was finding his way, slowly but surely, into the young man he was meant to be. One Saturday morning, Grace sat with a cup of tea on the porch, watching the sun rise. The air was still cool, and the world seemed to be holding its breath, as though waiting for something to happen. And then, Lucas appeared, stepping outside with a shy smile on his face, holding a piece of paper in his hand. Grace raised an eyebrow as he walked toward her, his expression a mix of uncertainty and excitement. "Mom, I got something," he said, his voice softer than usual. He handed her the paper, and Grace looked down to find a letter from the school's principal. At first, she didn't understand what she was looking at. It was an award letter, for Lucas. "I don't really know what to say. I wasn't expecting this," Lucas continued, shifting his weight nervously. "But the principal said I'm being recognized for the improvement I've made this year, not just in school, but in my attitude and behavior." Grace blinked, surprised, but then it hit her. This wasn't just an award for academic performance. It was for something much deeper. It was for character. For growth. For change. Tears filled her eyes, and she fought to keep them from spilling over. She took the letter in her hands and smiled at him. "Lucas. I am so proud of you. You've worked so hard, and you've come so far." Lucas smiled too, though it was a little hesitant, unsure of how to receive this kind of praise. "I still mess up sometimes," he admitted, his voice low. "I still don't always get it right." Grace placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And that's okay. We all mess up. The important thing is that you're trying. You're trying, and you're making progress." For a moment, they stood there, side by side, watching the world around them awaken. It felt like a new beginning for both of them, not just for Lucas, but for their relationship. They had come a long way together, and this award was more than just a piece of paper. It was proof that the effort, the love, and the tough decisions had paid off. The words stung like a slap to the face. Grace's mind was spinning. How did this happen? Where had she gone wrong? She always thought she was doing her best. Why didn't she see this coming? She hung up the phone, the silence of the house suddenly feeling suffocating. Her heart pounded, and for a moment, all she could do was sit there, staring at nothing, thinking, reflecting. How had it come to this? She remembered the first time she had spoiled him, really spoiled him. Lucas had been just a little boy then, maybe 5 or 6, his eyes wide with wonder as he looked up at her. He had asked for a toy, one that was far more expensive than she could afford at the time. But Grace had loved him so much, she couldn't stand to see the disappointment on his face. So, she went ahead and bought it for him. And from that moment on, she kept giving him more, and more. She would make excuses for him when he misbehaved, telling herself, he's just a child. She told herself that he would understand one day, that the world would teach him what she couldn't. But, the world wasn't teaching him. She wasn't teaching him. And now, here they were. The consequences were staring her right in the face. She stood up, feeling like the walls were closing in around her. She needed to do something. She had to make it right. But what could she do? Later that day, Grace went to the school, her mind heavy with guilt. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as she made her way to the principal's office. The air felt thick, tense, as if everyone in the school knew what was coming, even though they didn't. When she walked into the office, Lucas was sitting there, slumped in a chair. His eyes avoided hers, his face flushed with embarrassment and something else, maybe anger. Maybe regret. But Grace couldn't tell. She only saw the boy she had raised, the boy she loved so fiercely, but who seemed like a stranger to her now. The principal was sitting behind a desk, his expression stern but kind. He greeted her with a nod, and they sat down across from one another. The room felt cold, distant. Mrs. Walker, the principal began, I'm afraid we've reached a point where we can't ignore Lucas's behavior any longer. We've tried to intervene, but this behavior has been escalating for months. We need a plan to get him back on track. Grace's heart sank. How did it get so bad? The words hit her like a wave, and she realized, in that moment, how much she had failed her son. And learned that love wasn't just about giving, it was about teaching, guiding, and sometimes letting go of what was easy in order to help the person you love become the best version of themselves. Grace knew that there would still be moments when life would test them. There would still be challenges ahead. But as she looked at Lucas, as she saw the man he was becoming, she knew that they were ready for whatever came next. They had found their way. And it had been worth every moment of struggle. Worth every sacrifice, every tear, every hard choice. Because the best kind of love isn't the kind that protects someone from everything, it's the kind that helps them face the world, head on, ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that await. And together, they had learned how to do just that. Time moves in strange ways. Some days feel like they last forever, full of small victories and quiet, tender moments. Other days, the years seem to vanish before you can even blink. But the journey that Grace and Lucas had taken together was one that would stay with them forever. It wasn't a journey of perfection, nor was it a journey of easy answers. But it was a journey of transformation, of healing, of rebuilding. As Lucas prepared for college, Grace sat in their living room, looking at him with a bittersweet mix of pride and melancholy. The boy who had once been reckless, lost in the blur of entitlement, was now a young man, eager to step into the world. He had come so far, but the truth was, he wasn't finished yet. None of us ever are. I can't believe how much you've changed, Grace said, the words coming out before she even realized they had. She couldn't help it. It still amazed her, how far Lucas had come in such a short amount of time. How they both had come so far. Lucas, who had once avoided these deep conversations, now sat across from her, looking her in the eyes with a maturity that hadn't been there before. I know, he said quietly, his voice full of gratitude. I still mess up sometimes, but I'm ready. Ready for college, ready for the world. And ready to keep learning. Grace smiled, the love in her heart overwhelming. I know you are. And I'll always be here, Lucas. No matter where you go, no matter what happens, I'll always be here. There was silence for a moment, as they both took in the weight of that simple truth. No matter how far apart they might be, no matter what life threw their way, they would always have each other. They had been through too much together to ever lose that bond. Lucas stood up and walked toward the door, the box of his things packed and ready to go. He stopped, turned, and looked back at Grace. You taught me something important, Mom. You taught me that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to mess up. And it's okay to ask for help. I'm not scared anymore. I'm not scared of failing. I'm not scared of life. Grace's heart swelled, and she stood, walking over to him. For the first time, she truly saw the man standing before her, not just the boy she had raised, but the person he was becoming. You never were alone in this, Lucas, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. We've always been a team. Always. He smiled, his eyes glistening with tears. Thanks, Mom. For everything. I'll make you proud. I already am, she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace, holding on to the boy she had always loved and the man he was now. In that moment, everything came full circle. The mistakes, the heartbreak, the moments of doubt, they were all part of the process. The journey was never about being perfect. It was about learning, growing, and knowing when to ask for help. It was about giving your best, even when you didn't think you had anything left to give. And Grace knew that, no matter what the future held, Lucas was ready. He was ready for college, ready for life, and ready to face whatever came his way. Because now, he had something far more important than all the material things she had ever given him. He had strength, resilience, and the understanding that nothing, no matter how hard it seemed, was impossible to overcome. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, tap the subscribe button, thank you, and also check out our old video so interesting also.